How I turned my boss's betrayal into my greatest success. The beginning of the end. My fingers trembled as I stared at the email. 3 years of dedication to Horizon Tech, countless late nights, weekends sacrificed to emergency client calls, family gatherings missed for last-minute presentations, and this was how it ended. A meeting request from HR for 9 a.m. tomorrow, copied to Mark Daniels, VP of Client Services. My boss. My mentor turned nemesis. I knew immediately what was coming. The rumors had been swirling for weeks about layoffs, but I had foolishly believed Mark's reassurances that my position was secure. Kelly, you're one of our top performers. Your team has the highest client retention rate in the company. You have nothing to worry about, he had said just last week during our one-on-one, his hand on my shoulder, that practiced smile never quite reaching his eyes. I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone. At 36, I had given my prime years to this company. I had turned down a competitor's offer last year because Mark had convinced me that my path to directorship was clear at Horizon. Just 12 more months of proving yourself, he'd said. We have big plans for you. I should have known better when those big plans never materialized on paper. Mark Daniels, with his MBA from Wharton and his country club connections, had been systematically pushing me out for months. It started after the company-wide meeting where the CEO had publicly praised my innovative customer retention strategy. I noticed the change in Mark immediately. Suddenly, my ideas needed more development before presentation, my reports required additional review, and my team's successes were attributed to excellent management oversight. My husband, David, found me still sitting in the dark when he returned from picking up our 6-year-old daughter, Emma, from her piano lesson. Kelly, what's wrong? He asked, flipping on the kitchen light, his brow furrowing with concern. I showed him the email. We'd been through enough corporate restructures to recognize the signs. They can't do this to you, he said, his therapist's instinct to comfort immediately kicking in. You've generated millions for them. Your client satisfaction scores are off the charts. Oh, but they can, I replied, a strange calm replacing my initial shock. And Mark has been planning this for months. That night, after tucking Emma into bed with her favorite story about a princess who rescues herself, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything. Every email where Mark had taken credit for my work, every client interaction he'd undermined, every meeting where he dismissed my input only to present it as his own idea weeks later. I had 3 years of receipts, carefully archived because something in my gut had always told me this day might come. The digital trail painted a clear picture: systematic discrimination, gaslighting, and intellectual property theft disguised as team collaboration. As I compiled the evidence, a plan began to form, not for a lawsuit, but for something far more satisfying in the long run. The termination. The HR office had always felt sterile, but never more so than now. Megan from HR sat across from me, her expression professionally sympathetic but distant. Mark sat beside her, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. We're restructuring the department, Megan said mechanically, sliding a folder across the table. Your position has been eliminated. Mark leaned forward, hands clasped on the table, wedding ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. I remembered attending his wedding 3 years ago, bringing an expensive gift from his registry, celebrating what I then thought was not just a boss but a friend. Kelly, this isn't personal, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. We value your contributions, but in this economic climate, difficult decisions must be made. I understand, I replied, my voice steadier than I'd expected. May I ask who will be handling my accounts? A flicker of discomfort crossed his face before the corporate mask returned. I'll be personally overseeing the transition. We've promoted Jason to team lead. He'll manage day-to-day operations. Jason, my assistant whom I had trained from scratch just 8 months ago. The assistant who still came to me with questions about handling difficult client situations. The assistant who had 0 experience with our top-tier accounts. I see, I said, opening the folder. Inside was a severance package, 2 months salary in exchange for signing an NDA and non-compete agreement that would prevent me from working with any competing firm or contacting any of Horizon's clients for 18 months. I'll need to review this with my attorney, I said, gathering my things. Mark's smile faltered slightly. We'd appreciate a quick turnaround on this, Kelly. By end of week would be ideal. There was a subtle threat underneath his polite tone. Sign quickly, or even this meager offering might disappear. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral as I walked out of Horizon Tech for what they thought would be the last time. Security was waiting by my desk, a cardboard box already containing my personal items, the family photo, the plant David had given me on my first day at Horizon, the coffee mug Emma had painted for Mother's Day. 3 years of my professional life reduced to a box that could barely hold a week's worth of groceries. I can escort myself out, I told the security guard, a man who had greeted me by name every morning for years but now wouldn't meet my eyes. As I walked through the open office, I could feel the stares of my colleagues, a mixture of sympathy, relief that it wasn't them, and the silent acknowledgement that they would continue working with the very people who had just discarded me. Kelly, came a whisper as I passed the creative department. Sarah, one of the graphic designers I had collaborated with on client presentations, slipped a piece of paper into my hand. My personal number. Let me know you're okay. I gave her a slight nod, touched by this small act of rebellion against the corporate directive to treat the terminated as if they had ceased to exist. The strategy. Instead of driving home, I went to my favorite coffee shop, a small, independent place that made the best lavender lattes in the city. I needed neutral ground to think, away from both the toxicity of Horizon and the comforting distraction of home. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Phoenix Protocol. If Horizon thought they were burning my career to the ground, they were about to discover I was very good at rising from ashes. The truth was, I had prepared for this moment more thoroughly than Mark could have imagined. For the past year, I'd been building relationships with our clients outside the company's ecosystem, connecting on LinkedIn, attending the same industry conferences, establishing myself as a trusted advisor independent of my role at Horizon. I had also been developing my own client management software on the side, one that addressed all the limitations of Horizon's outdated system that clients constantly complained about. It wasn't a violation of my employment contract. I'd been careful to work on it using my own resources and time, and the concepts were based on publicly available information and industry best practices, not proprietary Horizon technology. The barista brought me a fresh latte, eyeing my intense focus with curiosity. "Rough day?" she asked. "Just transitioning," I replied with a smile that felt more genuine than any I'd managed in weeks. I called my attorney, Rebecca, who had been a college roommate and was now a partner at a prestigious firm specializing in employment law. "They want you to sign a non-compete for only 2 months' salary," she said, incredulous after I explained the situation. "And after what sounds like a clear pattern of discrimination and theft of intellectual property. Forward me everything you've documented." "I'm not looking to sue them, Becca," I clarified. "I just want fair compensation and the freedom to move forward on my own terms." "Let me see what we're working with before making any decisions," she replied. Sometimes the best leverage isn't a lawsuit but the credible threat of one. Within 24 hours, Rebecca had responded with a counteroffer that made me smile for the first time since receiving that HR email, no non-compete, 6-month severance, and a letter of recommendation acknowledging my contributions to the company's success. "They'll never agree to drop the non-compete," I said during our phone call. "Mark knows exactly how valuable my client relationships are." "Trust me," Rebecca replied, the confidence in her voice reminding me of why she was one of the most sought-after employment attorneys in the city. "Based on what you've sent me, they'll want to avoid litigation. Your documentation is exceptionally thorough, and some of these emails, well, let's just say no company wants this kind of behavior from a VP made public. 6 months of salary is cheaper than a lawsuit and the publicity it would bring." She was right. Within 48 hours, Horizon's legal team had accepted our counteroffer with minimal pushback. Mark must have been livid, but he never contacted me directly. I signed the agreement, accepted my 6 months of runway funding, and got to work on the next phase of my plan. David was my rock during those uncertain early weeks. He took over more of the household responsibilities without comment, created space for me to work late into the night on my business plan, and never once suggested I take the safer route of looking for another corporate position. "You've been talking about this software idea for years," he reminded me as we sat on our back deck one evening, watching Emma chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Maybe this is the universe's way of giving you a push." I watched my daughter, fearless and determined as she darted across the lawn, jar in hand. "Maybe it is," I agreed, feeling a sense of possibility unfurling within me for the first time in years. The execution. I launched Fidelity Connect, my client management platform, within 2 months. The name was deliberate, a subtle nod to the loyalty I had always shown my clients, a quality that Horizon would soon discover was irreplaceable. The platform incorporated everything I had learned from years of client feedback: streamlined communication channels, transparent project tracking, customizable reporting dashboards, and integrated billing that eliminated the invoicing delays that had been Horizon's Achilles heel. My first call was to Westridge Capital, Horizon's largest client, and one that I had personally saved from leaving after a major service failure the previous year. "Kelly, I was wondering when I'd hear from you," said Diana, their chief marketing officer, her voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Things have been a mess since you left. This new team doesn't understand our needs at all." "I have something that might interest you," I said, and scheduled a demo of my platform. The demonstration went better than I could have hoped. Diana's team asked insightful questions, pointed out minor improvements that could be made, and then, in a moment that validated all the late nights and uncertainty, asked about pricing and implementation timelines. "To be clear," Diana said as the meeting wrapped up, "we're still under contract with Horizon for another 4 months. "I understand," I replied. "Fidelity Connect will be here when you're ready to make a change." What I didn't need to say, was that 4 months was nothing in the business world. I could wait. One by one, I reached out to my former clients. I didn't poach. I didn't have to. They came to me after experiencing the drop in service quality. By month 4, I had secured contracts with 5 major clients who had left Horizon, representing over $2 million in annual revenue. My LinkedIn posts about client-centered service approaches gained traction in the industry. I wrote articles about the future of client management technology that were shared hundreds of times. I was invited to speak at conferences where I carefully avoided mentioning Horizon, while clearly establishing myself as an expert in the field that had once been my job. By month 6, Fidelity Connect had a staff of 12, including 3 former Horizon employees who had also been laid off in the restructuring. We moved into a small but stylish office in the same business district as Horizon, just 2 blocks away. I chose the location deliberately, not out of pettiness, but strategic visibility. I wanted Horizon's remaining employees to see our logo, to watch our team arrive each morning with purpose and energy, to wonder what might have been if their company had valued innovation over hierarchy. Emma helped me decorate my new office, insisting that every good CEO needed a magic chair for thinking big thoughts. David surprised me with a custom nameplate for my desk. Kelly Reeves, founder and CEO, the first time I'd seen my new title in physical form. "I'm proud of you," he said, watching me run my fingers over the engraved letters. "You turned a crisis into a catalyst." "We're not out of the woods yet," I cautioned. "We need to land at least 3 more major clients to be sustainable long-term." "You will," he said with a quiet certainty that had grounded me throughout our 12 years together. "You've never failed at anything you truly wanted." The ripple effects. I never actively sought information about Mark or Horizon, but news travels fast in our industry. Our city's business community was tight-knit, and corporate gossip flowed freely at networking events and industry functions. Jason, my former assistant, reached out via LinkedIn 6 months after the launch of Fidelity Connect. "I made a huge mistake," his message read. "I should never have accepted that promotion the way it happened. The clients are unhappy, the team is falling apart, and Mark blames everyone but himself. They've lost 7 major accounts in the past quarter. The CEO is asking questions." I read the message twice before deciding how to respond. Part of me, the part still nursing the wound of betrayal, wanted to savor this news. But I had learned that success and bitterness cannot coexist in the same space. We all make career decisions with the information available at the time, I wrote back. What matters is what you do next. I wish you well, Jason. He responded asking if Fidelity Connect was hiring. I wasn't ready for that, not yet. Some bridges, once burned, needed time before reconstruction could begin. Sarah from the creative department was a different story. She had reached out within weeks of my departure, disgusted by the toxic environment that had intensified after I left. Her design skills were exceptional, and her understanding of client needs made her an invaluable addition to our growing team. She became our creative director, building a department that produced work far superior to what Horizon had ever managed. It's different here, she told me after her first month. People actually want to come to work. They're not watching the clock, waiting to escape. Building a positive company culture was as important to me as our bottom line. We instituted policies that respected work-life balance, flexible hours, remote work options before they became standard, generous parental leave. We created a client management approach based on true partnership rather than the extractive model Horizon had employed. Our reputation grew, not just for our innovative platform, but for our business ethos. Industry publications began to take notice. A prominent tech blog ran a feature on women-led startups disrupting established industries, highlighting Fidelity Connect as a case study in agile development and responsive client service. Then came the Industry Gala, an annual event where I knew I would finally come face-to-face with my former employers. The previous year, I had still been licking my wounds, focusing on building my company rather than making public appearances. But now, with Fidelity Connect recognized as a rising star in the industry, my presence was expected. I bought a new dress, deep blue, fitted, professional but striking, and walked in with my head high, my company's recent Industry Innovation Award nomination giving me all the confidence I needed. I spotted Mark immediately. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from failing upward until you reach a position where failure is no longer tolerated. His designer suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the slight slump in his shoulders as he forced laughter at whatever the Horizon CEO was saying. I circulated through the room, greeting former colleagues, potential clients, and industry peers with genuine warmth. I was midway through a fascinating conversation with the founder of a complimentary service platform when I sensed Mark's approach. "Kelly," he said, intercepting me at the bar. "You look well."
"Thank you, Mark.
"How's Horizon?" "Thriving," he said too quickly. "We've pivoted to a new client strategy that's showing promising results." "I'm glad to hear it," I replied, taking a sip of my champagne, noting the slight tremor in his hand as he clutched his whiskey. "Your new venture seems to be getting attention," he continued, his tone carefully calibrated between condescension and grudging respect. "Though I imagine it's challenging to scale without institutional backing." Before I could respond, Diana from Westridge Capital appeared at my side, resplendent in a crimson gown that matched her company's logo. "Kelly, there you are. The team from Axion Global wants to meet you. They're interested in migrating their entire client base to your platform." She nodded curtly to Mark. "Mr. Daniels." The color drained from Mark's face. Axion Global had been Horizon's white whale, a prospect they had been pursuing for years without success. "If you'll excuse me," I said to Mark, "duty calls." As Diana led me away, she whispered, "Did you see his face? Worth every penny of your premium pricing structure." I laughed, but took no real pleasure in Mark's discomfort. Success was my focus now, not revenge. Besides, true revenge wasn't a moment of embarrassment at a gala. It was building something lasting that made the person who underestimated you irrelevant to your future. The growth. Within a year, Fidelity Connect had grown to a team of 35 and moved to a full floor in one of the city's premier office buildings. Our client list included companies that had previously been exclusive to larger firms like Horizon. Our platform had been featured in industry publications as a case study in client-centered design. The pace was exhilarating but unsustainable. I found myself working longer hours than I had at Horizon, the irony of which wasn't lost on me. The difference was ownership. These were my hours to give, my vision to build, my terms to set. Still, Emma was growing up fast, and David had been patient beyond measure with my startup schedule. It was time to evolve not just my company but my role within it. I hired a CEO with extensive experience scaling startups, stepping into the role of Chief Innovation Officer, where I could focus on product development and client strategy, the work I had always loved most. Relinquishing total control was terrifying, but necessary for both the company's growth and my personal balance. "How does it feel to give away your baby?" David asked the night after we announced the new leadership structure. "Like watching Emma go to her first day of school," I admitted. "Scary but necessary." Emma, now 8 and full of opinions, looked up from her tablet. "Did you make sure the new boss knows the rules, Mom?" "What rules are those, sweetheart?" I asked, smiling at her serious expression. "That everyone gets to have good ideas, even if they're new. And nobody gets to steal somebody else's good ideas and pretend they thought of it." Out of the mouths of babes. I had been more transparent with Emma about my Horizon experience than perhaps most parents would be, translating corporate politics into playground equivalents she could understand. In return, she had offered perspectives that cut through complexity with childlike clarity. "Yes, Emma," I assured her. "Those rules are actually written into our company handbook now." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her game. David squeezed my hand under the table, understanding as always. Mark's fall came not from my hand, but from his own actions. A former colleague sent me a link to a Business Journal article announcing a leadership transition. At Horizon Tech, reading between the lines, Mark had been pushed out after 2 years of declining client retention and revenue loss. The new VP was someone I didn't know, brought in from outside to revitalize the client services approach. That same week, I received a LinkedIn connection request from Mark. I accepted it out of curiosity. His profile showed he had started a strategic consulting business, the typical landing place for executives between positions. His recommendation requests to former colleagues sat unanswered. Then came the message I never expected. "Kelly, I'm reaching out to acknowledge that I made serious errors in judgment during our time working together. Watching your success with Fidelity Connect has been a powerful lesson in recognizing and supporting talent rather than feeling threatened by it. If you're open to it, I'd appreciate the opportunity to buy you coffee and apologize properly." I stared at the message for a long time. 3 years ago, such an acknowledgement would have meant everything to me. Now it was just another notification in my busy day. I decided to respond with the same grace I wished he had shown me when I was vulnerable. "Thank you for your message, Mark. I appreciate the acknowledgement. While I don't think coffee is necessary, I wish you well in your future endeavors." The expansion. In our 3rd year, Fidelity Connect faced a critical juncture. We had saturated our initial market and needed to expand either geographically or into adjacent service areas. The executive team was divided, with our CEO pushing for rapid expansion into European markets, while I advocated for developing complementary products that would deepen our relationships with existing clients. The debate came to a head during a tense board meeting where I found myself defending my vision against financial projections that favored international growth. "The numbers support Gerald's approach," our CFO said, referencing our CEO's expansion plan. "European markets represent a potential $50 million in annual revenue within 3 years." I took a deep breath, remembering all the times Mark had dismissed my insights because they didn't align with his preconceived strategies. This was different. I had founded this company precisely to create space for evidence-based innovation rather than ego-driven decisions. "The numbers tell one story," I acknowledged, "but our client feedback tells another. We've surveyed our top 20 clients, and 18 of them have expressed interest in additional services that integrate with our current platform. The lifetime value of deepening these relationships exceeds the projected European revenue by 30% when you account for acquisition costs and currency fluctuations." I slid a comprehensive analysis across the table, one I had prepared knowing this moment would come. The board members reviewed it in silence. "We could do both," Gerald suggested, a note of defensiveness in his voice. "Split our development resources. Dividing our focus would compromise quality on both fronts," I countered. I propose we defer European expansion by 18 months while we develop and launch our complementary services suite. We'll enter the European market stronger, with a more comprehensive offering that will be harder for competitors to match. The board sided with my approach, a validation of the business instincts that Mark had once dismissed. Gerald was initially frustrated, but eventually came to see the wisdom in the strategy. By the time we did expand internationally, our service ecosystem was so robust that European clients signed on at twice the projected rate. This victory wasn't just about being right, it was about creating a corporate culture where decisions were made based on merit rather than hierarchy. I made sure every team member understood that their insights were valuable, regardless of their position or tenure. The reflection. As I turned off my computer that evening in my corner office overlooking the city lights, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had felt like an ending had actually been the beginning of something far greater than I could have built within the constraints of working for someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Dinner reservation at 8. Celebrating your 3-year Independence Day. I smiled. 3 years since that HR meeting. 3 years since the day I thought my career was falling apart, when it was actually falling into place. The following week, a journalist from a major business publication contacted me for a feature they were doing on women entrepreneurs who had revolutionized traditional industries. Your story is compelling, she said during our interview. Many would view being pushed out of a corporate position as a career setback, but you transformed it into a springboard. What would you say to other women facing similar challenges? I thought carefully before answering, aware that my words might reach someone at their own crossroads. Document everything, know your worth, and build relationships based on genuine value. When faced with injustice, you have 2 options. Let it defeat you, or let it reveal your true strength. The biggest mistake my former employer made wasn't letting me go, it was underestimating who I would become without them. The article came out a month later, featuring Fidelity Connect as a case study in innovation born from adversity. Requests for interviews and speaking engagements flooded my inbox. My social media following exploded as women in corporate settings shared their own stories of overcoming workplace challenges. I hired an assistant, paying well above market rate and establishing clear pathways for growth within the company to help manage the sudden increase in public interest. We launched a mentorship program for women in tech, and I made sure every member of my leadership team understood that our culture would be defined by lifting others up, not holding them down. Emma, now 9, found me reading through applications for our mentorship program one evening. She climbed onto the sofa beside me, peering at the screen with interest. Are these all people who want to learn from you, Mom? Yes, I said, scrolling through the impressive collection of resumes. We can only accept 20 for this cohort, though. She considered this seriously. You should pick the ones who are brave, but maybe don't know it yet. I looked at my daughter, surprised by her insight. What makes you say that? Because that was you, right? You were brave, but you didn't know how brave until you had to be. I hugged her close, marveling at how children can distill complex truths to their essence. That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I'll look for. The legacy. 5 years after that fateful HR meeting, I stood on stage accepting an Entrepreneur of the Year award, looking out at a room full of industry leaders, including several Horizon executives. The new CEO of Horizon had reached out months earlier about potential collaboration opportunities. Their client base was recovering, but their technology lagged behind. In the spirit of industry advancement, he had written, "Perhaps there's a way our companies can complement each other's strengths." It was a carefully worded olive branch from a company that had once discarded me. After consultation with my team and board, we eventually agreed to a partnership that allowed smaller clients to use a modified version of our platform under the Horizon brand, with appropriate licensing fees paid to Fidelity Connect. It was a win-win arrangement that acknowledged the reality of the market. My company had become too significant to ignore. As for Mark, I heard through the grapevine that he had finally secured a position with a smaller firm in another state, a significant step down from his former prestige, but a chance to rebuild. I genuinely hoped he had learned from his mistakes. The corporate world had enough destructive leadership without adding another embittered executive to the mix. The award sat on my desk as a reminder not of triumph over adversity, but of transformation through it. The betrayal that had once threatened to define me had instead refined me, burning away insecurities and leaving behind a clearer vision of my capabilities and purpose. My assistant knocked on my door, interrupting my reflection. "Your 2 o'clock is here. The venture capital team interested in funding our international expansion." I nodded, straightening my jacket as I stood. "Also," she added with a smile, "your husband called. He wanted to remind you about your dinner reservation tonight. He said it's not negotiable, even for the boss." I laughed. "Tell them I'll be right out." As I walked toward the conference room, I passed the wall where we displayed our company values, prominently featuring the one I had insisted be placed first: recognize and celebrate the brilliance in others. The best revenge wasn't watching someone fall after they pushed you down. It was rising so magnificently that they became irrelevant to your story. The venture capital meeting went well, too well, perhaps. Their offer was generous, but would require me to step back into the CEO role and commit to another 5 years of intensive growth. "We'll need your full attention," the lead investor said. "Your vision is what makes this company special." I promised to consider their offer, but as I drove home that evening, I already knew my answer. Success meant different things at different stages of life. 5 years ago, it had meant proving my worth in the business world. Now, it meant building something sustainable that could thrive without my constant presence. Emma had a soccer tournament coming up. David and I had been talking about taking a sabbatical to travel. There were other ideas I wanted to explore, other contributions I could make beyond Fidelity Connect. The investors would be disappointed, but I had learned the hard way that living to fulfill others' expectations was a path to dissatisfaction. I would counter with my own terms: mentorship of the next generation of leadership, strategic advisory capacity, and a more flexible commitment that would allow me to balance business success with personal fulfillment. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Emma practicing soccer drills in the front yard while David cheered her on. They waved as I parked, their faces lighting up in a way no business success could ever match. "How was your big meeting?" David asked as I joined them. "Interesting," I replied. "They want me to commit to 5 more years as CEO. And," he prompted, knowing me well enough to sense my hesitation. "And I'm going to tell them that success isn't just about building a bigger company. It's about building a better life." Emma stopped dribbling her ball and looked up at me. "Does that mean you can come to my whole tournament this weekend?" I knelt down to her level, the way I used to when she was smaller. "It means I'm going to be there for all your tournaments from now on. And we might take that trip to Japan you've been talking about." She threw her arms around me with a whoop of excitement, nearly knocking me over. Later that evening, as we walked to the restaurant for our celebration dinner, David took my hand. "You know, when you first got laid off, I was worried about you. Not about whether you'd succeed, I never doubted that, but about whether the experience would change who you are." "Hasn't it?" I asked, curious about his perspective. "Not in the ways that matter," he said. "You're still the woman who sees potential where others see problems. You're still kind when you could be bitter. You still believe in building people up rather than tearing them down." I thought about Mark, about Horizon, about all the twists and turns that had led me here. The experience didn't change who I am, I agreed. It just revealed it, to me and everyone else. The restaurant was just ahead, warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside were friends waiting to celebrate not just my professional success, but the journey that had brought me to this moment of clarity and purpose. I had once thought revenge would feel like watching those who hurt me suffer. Instead, it felt like this: walking hand in hand with my husband toward a future of my own design, secure in the knowledge that my worth was never dependent on anyone else's recognition. The ultimate victory wasn't in proving others wrong, it was in proving myself right. The end.